concentration camps during the war meant thousands of ruined lives. Few returned home afterwards. Gas chambers, crematoria, unbearable physical labor, hunger, cold. Auschwitz is considered one of the worst concentration camps. And one of the most mentioned people in the testimonies of survivors is Dr. Joseph Mengele. He has many nicknames, and all of them are necessarily associated with something very terrible. For his experiments in the concentration camp, there was even a separate sector lined with barracks containing prisoners that were reserved exclusively for Dr. Mengele. But there is one case with a happy ending in this story. A family of 7 managed to survive and live to liberation, despite the sophistication of the experiments conducted by the doctor. So, even before the war, Szymon Ovitz, a Romanian citizen, had become a rather conspicuous local musician. On the wave of popularity, the man, despite his small stature, managed to marry twice quite healthy young beautiful women, and from these marriages to have 10 children, 7 of whom were dwarfs like himself. Congenital disease made this family the dwarfs of fairy tales. And when Hitler created the Nazi Party in 1923, the Ovitz family began to make money from the disease, as the bone deformity made it impossible to work. The mother convinced her 7 children to form the Lilliputian jazz band, and while the Nazis subjugated the world, the Ovitz Jews toured Eastern Europe singing songs in Yiddish, Hungarian, Romanian, Russian and German. The Ovitz family excelled. They were the first in their neighborhood to own a car. They sang, they had children, and their children were of normal height. When the Ovitzes were not giving concerts, they lived in a shared family home in mysterious Transylvania, like dwarves from the Snow White fairy tales, in the Magic Land. In Germany, where the fairy tale was written by the Grimm brothers, lived the most devoted reader. His name was Adolf Hitler, and now he became the leader of the Third Reich. When the Nazis started the war in Europe in 1939, the Ovitzes were still at large, because their documents did not mention that they were Jews. This saved them because the persecution of Jews had already begun. The Ovitz observed Jewish traditions until the spring of 1944. But when the Nazis occupied Hungary, they could no longer hide the secret of their blood. They were forbidden to play, and young musicians had yellow stars sewn on their clothes. In May 1944, 12 members of the Ovitz family are traveling on a train bound for Auschwitz. One of the brothers escapes, thus being separated from his family, is captured and killed. The rest of the Ovitz family arrived at the camp, where they met the Angel of Death, the nickname of the Dr. Joseph Mengele, who carried out inhuman experiments on the prisoners of Auschwitz. Tens of thousands of innocent people fell into his hands. He ordered the Ovitz family to be housed in a special barracks. Mengele had a morbid passion for science and conducted many cruel human studies. But the Ovitz family did not see the Nazi doctor as a monster. He did not send them to the gas chamber, gave them the best food and a special uniform that protected them from the beatings of the SS guards. The Jews were even grateful to him. Before the operation, Dr. Mengele would visit them in their barracks and say lovingly, "Behind the hills and the 7 mountains dwell my beloved 7 dwarfs." And the dwarfs would call him Your Excellency and sing songs to Mengele if he asked them to. Why not, if it allows you to live a little longer? Mengele gave the smallest Lilliputians toys and sweets, which were sorted in the piles after the crematorium. Because there were 7 members of the family, he called them only by their names from the Snow White fairy tale. Then Dr. Mengele began to conduct gruesome experiments on the entire Ovitz family to find out if they were dwarfs. They had no idea what would be done to them. Ice water, boiling water and bone marrow transplants. Mengele was quite varied in his scientific experiments. The main purpose was to compare the endurance of people of normal height and dwarfs. The Ovitz family, going through all this over and over again every day, had no hope that they would ever be able to escape from the clutches of Dr. Mengele's laboratory. But fortunately, at the end of all these experiments, the entire Ovitz family survived, without any serious complications. Ovitz had to obey Mengele in everything, entertain him with jokes and songs, and pose for a film he made especially for Hitler. Knowing how fascinated Hitler was by dwarfs, Mengele sent him a video for Christmas. The Lilliputians sang Germanic songs to entertain the Führer so he wouldn't be sad and lonely in the war. Mengele brought the gnomes to a Christmas party at Auschwitz. Ovitz sang and danced for the Nazis. In January 1945, Dr. Mengele was transferred to another concentration camp and his untouchable barracks became ordinary barracks. When the Nazis realized that the war would soon be over and not in their favor, they rushed to purge the prisoners of Auschwitz. The Ovitz family was to be sent to the gas chamber on the 27th of January 1945. They waited for their fate, but on that very day, the Russians invaded the camp. Thus the family was saved. They became the only family to survive Auschwitz in its entirety. After liberation, they lived in a refugee camp in the Soviet Union, and then they were released and returned to their village on foot. For 7 months they traveled in a large caravan and never left. The whole family stayed together. Then they moved to Antwerp, and from there, after a few years, all together moved to Israel. There they lived the rest of their lives. The men married women of ordinary height and their children were born taller and taller. In Haifa they started to give concerts again, and still had full houses. But already in 1955 the family left the stage and everyone went to his own business. At the moment there is no one left alive from the Ovitz family. All brothers and sisters are buried in the same place, in the family cemetery.